Hello and welcome. This is my wife Mary and I'm Ed, and we are Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. We're excited you're joining us today. We present or expound on a principle or belief related to the SDA Sabbath School Quarterly each week. The Sabbath School lesson for this quarter is on the book of Isaiah. This week's lesson is entitled Defeat of the Assyrians and recounts the great military miracle God performed on Jerusalem's behalf when threatened by Sennacherib, king of Assyria. Sennacherib considered himself king of the world according to the reliefs that decorated his palace walls. Monday's lesson is entitled Propaganda and discusses the boasting of Sennacherib and the threats he made against Jerusalem, saying, "Do you not know what I and my fathers have done to all the peoples of other lands? Were the gods of the nations of those lands in any way able to deliver their lands out of my hand? How much less will your God deliver you from my hand?"
Wednesday's lesson is entitled The Rest of the Story and tells of God's victory over Sennacherib and the Assyrian army as recorded in 2 Kings 19:35-37, Isaiah 37:36-38, and 2 Chronicles 32:21-22. According to the lesson, scholars know that Sennacherib went home after the defeat and hastily lined his palace walls with reliefs depicting his earlier victory over Lachish in an effort to save face and ignore his swift defeat at Jerusalem. Sennacherib did not tell the rest of the story on his palace walls, but of course the Bible does. Additionally, on Sennacherib's stele, a stone monument recording the annals of the Assyrian king, Sennacherib boasts about shutting Hezekiah up like a caged bird inside the walls of Jerusalem, but does not mention its capture. Jerusalem is the only city mentioned on the stele to be besieged but not captured. So although the Assyrian account of this event is quite different from the biblical account, both agree on one thing: Sennacherib did not capture Jerusalem.
The lesson contends that Sennacherib did not tell the rest of the story concerning his siege against Jerusalem, and this indeed looks to be the case. Today we want to tell the rest of the story in another way, the story of the ultimate fate of Jerusalem just over 100 years later. This is not to take away from the amazing victory God gave Hezekiah over Sennacherib, but more about what ended up happening to Jerusalem down the road and why, and then how we can learn from their great mistake.
Most Seventh-day Adventists are aware of the fact that in 586 BCE, another foreign king, this time Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, succeeded in destroying Jerusalem. This is recorded in 2 Chronicles 36:15-21. It reads, "And the Lord God of their fathers sent warnings to them by his messengers, rising up early and sending them, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of God, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, till there was no remedy. Therefore he brought against them the king of the Chaldeans. He gave them all into his hand. Then they burned down the house of God, broke down the wall of Jerusalem, burned all its palaces with fire, and destroyed all its precious possessions. And those who escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, where they became servants to him and his sons until the rule of the kingdom of Persia."
Here we can see the problem clearly defined. They mocked the messengers of God, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, till there was no remedy. Of course, the Judeans doubtless did not think these messengers were actually sent from God. At least I hope not.
Let's take a look at one of these prophets whose message was rejected by God's denominated people. Jeremiah 7, starting in verse 1, reads, "The word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Stand at the gate of the Lord's house, and proclaim there this word, and say, Hear the word of the Lord, all you of Judah, who enter by these gates to worship the Lord. This is what the Lord of armies, the God of Israel, says. Amend your ways and your deeds, and I will let you live in this place. Do not trust in deceptive words, saying, This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. But go now to my place, which was in Shiloh, where I made my name dwell at the beginning, and see what I did to it because of the wickedness of my people Israel. And now, because you have done all these things, declares the Lord, and I spoke to you, speaking again and again, but you did not listen, and I called you, but you did not answer. Therefore I will do to the house which is called by my name, in which you trust, and to the place which I gave you and your fathers, just as I did to Shiloh. I will hurl you out of my sight, just as I have hurled out all your brothers and all the descendants of Ephraim.
So here we can see that Jeremiah obviously was one of those prophets of God calling for revival and reformation in the hearts of the people. God said that he had called to them through his prophets again and again, but they refused to listen. The people obviously preferred the words of those saying, "This is the temple of the Lord." How do we know? Well, Jeremiah was not allowed in the temple because of this little speech, and people even wanted to kill him for it. This is recorded in Jeremiah 26, 4 through 11. First, there is a recap of the prophecy in Jeremiah 7. Starting in verse 4, we read, "And you shall say to them, this is what the Lord says, if you do not listen to me, to walk in my law which I have set before you, to listen to the words of my servants the prophets, whom I have been sending you again and again, but you have not listened. Then I will make this house like Shiloh, and I will make this city a curse to all the nations of the earth." The priests and the prophets and the people heard Jeremiah speaking these words in the house of the Lord. Yet when Jeremiah finished speaking everything that the Lord had commanded him to speak to all the people, then the priests and the prophets and the people seized him, saying, "You must die. Why have you prophesied in the name of the Lord, saying, this house will be like Shiloh, and this city will be in ruins, without inhabitant?" And all the people gathered to Jeremiah at the house of the Lord. When the officials of Judah heard these things, they came up from the king's house to the house of the Lord and sat at the entrance of the new gate of the Lord's house. Then the priests and the prophets spoke to the officials and to all the people, saying, "A death sentence for this man, for he has prophesied against this city, just as you have heard with your own ears."
Here we can see that the leaders and members of God's denominated people in Jeremiah's day considered him to be a false prophet. Obviously, the words of Jeremiah came to be considered truly prophetic after the prophecies came to pass, hence his inclusion in the Hebrew Bible. But it was too late for Jeremiah's contemporaries. The people these words were intended for were either destroyed or taken into exile. We would hope that God's people learned their lesson from this, but history proves that they did not. Jesus himself repeated the warnings given here in Jeremiah 7, quoting Jeremiah 7:11 during the cleansing of the temple, as recorded in Matthew 21, 12 through 17, Mark 11, 15 through 19, Luke 19, 45 through 48, and John 2, 13 through 16. Jesus prophetically warned of the same errors being committed again. By quoting from Jeremiah chapter 7, Jesus was warning the Jews that the temple was going to be destroyed once again, just like had happened at Shiloh and again in 586 BC in Jerusalem by the Babylonians. This message was not lost on the Jewish leadership in Jesus' day. Just as was the case for Jeremiah, the people were planning to kill Jesus too.
But this could not happen to us, right?
Well, if we carefully read the message to the angel of the church of Laodicea in Revelation 3, 14 through 22, we will hopefully realize that Jesus is giving a message just like that of Jeremiah 7 to us, God's denominated people today, once again.
Jesus gives a message of revival and reformation to us, the SDA Church and leadership. But what do we say to him? No, thank you. We have need of nothing. This is so similar to the Jews of Jeremiah's day saying, "This is the temple of the Lord, and we'll be protected because we are God's people." All the while, God was calling to them with messages of warning from his prophets again and again. God warned his people over and over again that they were not safe, and he does this again to us, the Laodiceans. Look at the warning given to us. "Because you are lukewarm, I will spew you out of my mouth." This is a cleansing of the temple indeed. Wouldn't you agree?
This message of revival and reformation has come to our people, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we believe, over and over again, not only through the prophetic ministry of Ellen White, but also since 1929, shortly after her death, through the ministry of subsequent prophets, including a prophet alive and in our midst today. Again and again, the Lord has sent us his prophets, but the General Conference, just like the priests of Jeremiah's day, has rejected them.
Jesus begs us to anoint our eyes with eye salve that we may see. This eye salve is none other than the messages of reformation and revival coming through God's inspired prophetic messengers. The psalmist of 119 said, "Open my eyes that I may behold wonderful things from your law, and your testimonies also are my delight." They are my advisors.
We know that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, Revelation 19:10, and that the remnant people are supposed to keep the commandments, the law of God, and have, present tense, the testimony of Jesus, which is the spirit of prophecy, Revelation 12:17. This is similar to what the psalmist was saying, that he too needed the testimony of God to advise him through the spirit of prophecy. Then his eyes would be opened or anointed with eye salve so that he could see the wonderful things from God's law.
Are you struggling with sin, struggling to keep the commandments of God? Take heart. God has been sending us prophet after prophet, message after message, starting with Ellen White, in order to help us understand the nature of sin and also to help us overcome sin in our lives. He does this even today with fresh messages of truth for our present circumstances, just like he did for his people in Jeremiah in Jesus' day.
For more on this, please see our video study, Justification by Faith, A Sinless Life, by Trent Wilde, linked in the description below and in the end screen, along with many other studies on this topic.
Thank you for staying with us through the entire video. We invite you to visit our website, www.bdsda.com, to learn more about who we are, and just as important, who we are not. Please join us each week, and we will continue to offer new and interesting insights for your Sabbath School studies. God bless.
Many blessings.